Turning to Psalm 31 this morning. Usually this time of year I pray and preach sometimes on the Advent, on the Sundays coming up to Christmas, on the Christmas stories, but I felt led away from that to this psalm. Maybe from now on we'll, as the Lord leads, take up something regarding this time of year. But we are at Psalm 31 this morning, and I believe that God has something to say to you, and has something to encourage you maybe with this morning from this psalm. Verse 1. In Thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. Let me never be ashamed. Deliver me in Thy righteousness. You know, David had a lot to be ashamed of if he would have let the devil annoy him in that area. David done some things, you know, that you and I haven't done, and he grieved God. But once he got the cleansing, he had no need ever to be ashamed. Don't you be ashamed this morning of things in your past life. Don't be ashamed of them. If you're a believer and you're saved and you're washed in the blood of the Lamb, you've nothing to be ashamed of this morning. They're gone. Those things are away. They're in the sea of God's forgetfulness. Don't let the devil annoy you with past sins that are gone, that he has forgotten about, and you're the only one that remembers them, and they give you an awful time. It's of the devil. Verse 2, Bow down thine ear to me, deliver me speedily. Be thou my strong rock, for an house of defence to save me. For thou art my rock and my fortress. Therefore for thy name's sake lead me and guide me. Pull me out of the net that they have laid privily for me, for thou art my strength. Into thine hand I commit my spirit. Thou hast redeemed me, O Lord God of truth. I have hated them that regard lying vanities, but I trust in the Lord. I will be glad and rejoice in thy mercy, for thou hast considered my trouble. Thou hast known my soul in adversities, and hast not shut me up into the hand of the enemy. Thou hast set my feet in a large room. Have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am in trouble. Mine eye is consumed with grief, yea, my soul and my belly. For my life is spent with grief, and my ears with sighing. My strength faileth because of mine iniquity, and my bones are consumed. I was a reproach among all mine enemies, but especially among my neighbours, and a fear to mine acquaintance, for they that did see me without fled from me. I am forgotten. As a dead man out of mind, I am like a broken vessel. For I heard the slander of many, fear was on every side. While they took counsel together against me, they devised to take away my life. But I trusted in thee, O Lord. I said, Thou art my God. My times are in thy hand. Deliver me from the hand of mine enemies, and from them that persecute me. Make thy face to shine upon thy servant. Save me for thy mercy's sake. Here he comes again. Let me not be ashamed, O Lord, for I have called upon thee. Let the wicked be ashamed, and let them be silent in the grave. Let the lying lips be put to silence, which speak grievous things proudly and contemptuously against the righteous. O how great is thy goodness, which thou hast laid up for them that fear thee, which thou hast wrought for them that trust in thee before the sons of men. Thou shalt hide them in the secret of thy presence. From the pride of man thou shalt keep them secretly in a pavilion from the strife of tongues. Blessed be the Lord, for he has showed me his marvellous kindness in a strong city. For I said in my haste, I am cut off from before thine eyes. Nevertheless, thou heardest the voice of my supplication when I cried unto thee. O love the Lord, all ye his saints. For the Lord preserveth the faithful, and plentifully rewardeth the proud doer. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart, all ye that hope in the Lord. And we know that God will bless the reading of this psalm to our hearts this morning. This, in one sense, is a very solemn psalm. And it's a solemn psalm because it reflects some of the saddest and the darkest hours of the reign of King David. It's a family crisis. And family crisis can reach a depth that other crises sometimes don't reach. C.H. Spurgeon said, and other scholars believe that it was penned, this psalm, during this subtle, vicious revolt of David's son Absalom to take the throne from him. And if you know the story about this incident in David's latter life, you'll know that as a loving father, he pardoned Absalom from some heinous crimes. And he brought him back into the palace again in spite of advice from top men. And he'd done everything that he could do to assist his son, this prince that was obstinate and stubborn and slanderous against him. And a war broke out in the house of David. Feuds and fights among families, I say again, over titles, over properties, over heirlooms and different things, can be very perilous and very bitter. You see, it says that Absalom stole the hearts of the people. He didn't woo the hearts or didn't win them. He stole the hearts of David's top men and turned almost all of them against him. He done it by a way of deception. Deception that hit David so hard that I believe it was the greatest trial of all his life. He was a man over 60 years of age. Solomon, his son, was just about 10 years of age. And if you read the story in 2 Samuel 15, it would bring tears to your eyes. This psalm was written in pain. 2 Samuel 15 tells us that he, wounded and weary with a handful of followers, he abdicated the throne and fled barefoot. And he went down across the east of the Kidron Valley, out over the Kidron Valley, and up the east of the Mount of Olives, in his bare feet, his feet burning in the sand, and as he went, he was weeping. And with a handful of followers around him, the great King David had nowhere even to lay his head. And it seems if you look at verse 22, he thought that all was over. Look at verse 22. Because here's what he said, and here's what he prayed as he went in sackcloth and ashes, weeping on the burning sands of the Mount of Olives. Here's what the great King David said: I am forgotten, as a dead man out of mind. I am a broken vessel. He said, I am cut off. I am cut off. I am dead man. I am a broken vessel. You see, friend, David's estimation of himself was very low. What he's saying here, it's over. What he's saying here, it's finished. I can't take any more. Let me say this morning. If the devil, and it says that David said this, so he spoke this openly. If the devil can get you this morning, listen to this now. If the devil can get you this morning to start rhetoric like this, and to start to talk out loud, and to start to say, it's over, it's finished, it's done, once he can get you to do that, this is a ploy of the devil. And I pray this morning that nobody's listening to me here or anywhere else, that you have let this get in upon you, that I'm finished, I'm done, I'm cut off, I am no use. This is what he said. If only we could learn in our hottest trials to shut our mouth. And I don't know what you're going through this morning, and I don't know what you're in this morning, and I don't know what you're thinking this morning, and I don't know who this message is for this morning, but if only we could shut our mouths. Because you're going to see in a moment that David regretted. His estimation of his thing of himself was very low. He's not finished. And you're not finished this morning. It's not over, and it's not over for you this morning. Not a bit of it. This is what the devil wants you to think, and this is what the devil wants you to say. It's bad enough thinking it, but once he gets you to say it. You see, my friend, we need to know the whole story. People say to me sometimes, oh, if only I could know what's going to happen tomorrow and next week. It's a good job you don't know. We get it hard enough to handle the day without tomorrow. Oh, if only I knew what's going to happen next week and going to happen. It's a good job. Now, David's up against it here. But we know the story. We know what has happened. Don't we know? In a few days, Absalom, and he takes no joy in this, let me tell you, but in a few days, Absalom's going to be hanging from a tree with 3 darts through his heart. In a few days, Ahithophel, his top commander, his next in line to him, Ahithophel, will be hanging from another tree because it says he hung himself. Take your time now. When he was going up in this terrible state up the Mount of Olives that day, broken and weeping, there was a boy the name of Shimei, and old Shimei got a lump of dirt and he fired it in David's face and kept firing it in his face and saying to him, you bloody man. He was casting up what he had done and how he had killed Bathsheba's husband, and he was casting it up. And I can tell you, in a few hours, Shimei's at his feet begging forgiveness. And it's not very long, let me tell you either, until David's back, and he's back with a bigger mandate, and he's back to chase out the Philistines again, and he's back to gather all the stuff for the temple, and he's back to die and to go into heaven with an abundant entrance. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. What did he say? He said, in my haste, I said, I'm cut off. I am done. So don't be too quick. Don't be too quick. But you see, you have it only David's estimation. You have David's supplication. David's supplication. Look at verse 22. For I said in my haste, I am cut off from before thine eyes. Nevertheless, thou heardest the voice of my supplication, which I cried unto thee. He quickly caught himself on, and he turned the matter over to prayer. Now look at what he says in verse 22. He said, in my haste I said I was cut off. Nevertheless, thou heardest the voice of my supplication. What's that word nevertheless mean? It means this: in spite of my moaning, in spite of my groaning, in spite of me having a pity party with myself, the Lord heard my cry. And you might think this morning, I've failed the Lord and I've complained all week and I've said to the Lord, why is this happening and why is that happening? And now He'll never hear me prayer, but He will hear your prayer, for He's gracious. And He listened to David and He let David go on. But He still heard his prayer. He still heard his prayer. Thou heard the voice of my supplication. I would say that the devil said to David, there's no use in you praying now. What's to be the use in you praying now after complaining and groaning and muttering for all those days? What do you pray? God will not hear you now, but the devil's a liar, And David said in verse 17, he says, look at what he said in verse 10, let me not be ashamed, O Lord. Nothing to be ashamed of. Let me not be ashamed, O Lord, for I have called upon Thee, but let the wicked be ashamed. My friend, that's the way you need to get at it. That's the way you need to dig in the heels, and you need to turn it back on the devil again when the depression comes and the oppression comes and the fears comes and the doubt comes and you're wondering about tomorrow and you're wondering about this and the other thing. My friend, that's the way to do it. Turn it back on the devil. Because David's long enough on the road to know that the enemy's at him here. Let the enemy, let them be ashamed and be silent in the graves. Now watch this, and this is very important. You not only see David's estimation and you hear his supplication, but then you see his jubilation. Look at verse 7. I will be glad and rejoice in Thy mercy. Look at verse 19. Oh, how great is Thy goodness. Now you take those two phrases and just think of them this morning. Can you believe it? That here's a man covered in sackcloth and ashes. He has lost everything by the wickedness of his son and those faithful friends those friends who were supposed to be faithful to him turned against him. He's barefooted. He has no place to stay. He's hunted across the mountain. And in the midst of it all, he's praising God for His goodness. He's praising God for His mercies. He's praising God for His blessings. There's a word for you here this morning, and it's this, and for me. There's a key here. What's the key? David's not now allowing this isolated incident to rob him of all that God has done for him in the past. He's not allowing it. We can't take one day in isolation. We can't take one trial in isolation. We can't take going into the fiery furnace for a period with God in health or whatever it might be. We can't take it in isolation. That's what the devil wants you to do. That's what depression and oppression is. He wants to cover you up, cover you in with that thing that you can't see the past and you can't think of the future, and he wants to corner you into that dark place. But David has caught on to it. And you catch on to it this morning. And you begin to let your mind lift to the blessings of the past. Think of the good days and the great days. Every day is not like this day. And start to go back and begin to thank God for saving you, for keeping you, for blessing you. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Thank Him for your children, thank Him for your family, thank Him for the health you have. Thank Him, thank Him, and thank Him, and thank Him, and begin to praise Him. I'll tell you, lift above it. We mustn't isolate one particular incident on its own. We can't do that. That's not fair to God. Maybe the storm's raging round some of you this morning. Maybe you can't read the Scriptures. You know, people say to me, I can't read these days. I said, don't get into bondage if you can't do your daily reading today. There's some of God's people that get into bondage, and you can get into bondage. And I'm not saying anything against reading through the Bible in a year, but I tell you this, you need discipline to do it. And when you miss a day, you have to read twice as much. And if you miss 2 days, I'll tell you, you'll be reading half the day. And you can get into bondage with it. And the devil will bring you into bondage. He'll bring you into bondage in a whole lot of ways. You know, God's not standing over you or me with a big stick this morning. And I think we need to learn something of the fatherhood and the love and the mercies of God toward us. And if we go a day without praying, and we go a day without our daily reading, and if we go bad days without any of those things, God doesn't love us any less. Maybe you can't read, maybe you can't pray, maybe you can't sing this morning. I don't know. But you remember the times that you could. Why don't you remember the days that you could? The days that you could read, the days that you could pray, the days that you could witness, the days that you could praise. Remember the days with the family, remember the days, good days, all those days. Think of His mercy. Think of His provision. Think of His grace. Now watch this in verse 19, for there's a very mighty truth here. Oh, how great is thy goodness. Watch this wee phrase. Which thou hast laid up. Now that word laid up there means to be laid in store and covered over and hidden out of sight for another time. Now I have a message on its own here this morning on that. You see, what's going on in your life and my life this morning, we cannot understand it at times, but it's hidden from us. It's covered over. And it will not be revealed to us until another time. That's what David's saying here. There's a depth of truth here. Do you remember when Peter remonstrated with the Lord when he went to wash the disciples' feet and to wash Peter's feet? Jesus said to him, Peter, what I do thou knowest not now, but thou wilt know hereafter. There was a mystery over it. He didn't understand it. The same with you this morning. What I'm doing, and God's always doing things, you know. And we don't think that He's doing very much. Oh, He's not doing much in my life. No, He's not. He's not doing very much for me. What I do, thou knowest not now. Not now. Thou know hereafter, thereafter. Oh, there'll come a day when you'll know it. And loved one this morning that's here with bereavement in your heart, there are things that you don't understand. But you know not now. But if only we can hold on, it's all going to be made plain. And I'll be touching on that on Thursday night, because the dark things are going to be made plain. I'll tell you, that'll be a mighty day. There's things that are stored up. There's things that are hidden. God has put them out of sight. Now, I could go down another line this morning. I could go down do you know the line I could go down to with this wee phrase this morning? God has hidden things. He has covered them over for another time. Do you know what I could go down? I could go down the line of fuel. Fuel. Because I can tell you, in this old earth tonight, God has hidden fuel. Today, He has hidden fuel. And away down in the heart of the earth, there's coal, and there's oil, and there's gas. And there's fossil fuels of all kinds, and there's minerals, and there's enough. If this world would go on 1,000,000 years, and it mightn't go on 1,000,000 days, let me tell you this, there's always be plenty. In the Red Sea, in the Barents Sea, in the Caspian Sea, In some of those seas of the world that nobody can get near because of conflicts, I tell you, way down in the depth of them, covered over, are hidden things. I have a tape out somewhere in this building, this place over the last, I don't know how many years ago. Treasures in darkness. I tell you, he has treasures in darkness that we know nothing about. And when you switch on your car and you're driving down the road, that's treasures out of darkness. And when you put a butt of coal on the fire some winter's night, that's treasures. Those are things that are hidden over. I tell you, men could get their hands on them. They're hidden over. Aye, and when you switch on the gas to cook yourself a meal, I tell you, it's come from the depth. And I don't know whether David's thinking of fuel or not. He may well have been. But he's praising the Lord for what is laid up and covered over. Now, I think it's not fuel he's after. Here's faith. Faith. Because there's not only physical treasures laid up, let me tell you, there's spiritual ones. And they're covered over this morning. And if only we could get a grip this morning of what God has preserved for us and provided for us. And what about this phrase? The unsearchable riches of Christ. What does the Bible talk about? The riches of Christ, the hidden riches, the riches of his glory. Who will ever get to the grip of that? And the riches of his grace, and the riches of his goodness, and the riches of his greatness, and the riches of his wisdom and his knowledge. Oh, the depth of the wisdom and the knowledge of God, they're past finding out. And when they're needed, they'll come. You see, God gives grace. He'll give you grace for whatever you face this week. And you know that if you go for a hospital appointment, if you have to go for an operation, a fellow said through a mission I had in Fermanagh years ago there, and he went in for an operation, and he was a drunken boy, he was a wild man, and he went in for an operation. He says, Bertie, as they were bringing me down to the theatre, he says, I thought I was sitting in an armchair at home. That's the grace of God. But you know, God will not give you grace to die now. And people thinking, well, I don't know how will I die? Will it be a stroke? Will it be cancer? Will it be a car accident? What way am I going to do? How will I face death? And what about the children? What about the money? And what about the home? You'll not get grace to die now if you're not dying. He'll give dying grace when it's needed. And he knows what you need this morning. And he has it hidden. And he'll give it to you when he thinks you need it and not 1 minute before it. And where you can get on without it, you can get on without it. He knoweth the way that we take. And he knoweth all things about us. Oh, we could go on with this morning. Oh, David's saying, oh, what a wonderful statement. Great is thy goodness which thou hast laid up and covered over for me. What about the glory this morning? What about heaven this morning? So you see David's estimation, you see David's supplication, you see David's jubilation, and you see David's preservation. And I kept this to last, verse 15. Now watch it. This is your text this morning. This is your word this morning. Don't be looking at anybody around you or anybody beside you. This is for you this morning. My times are in thy hand. No. Did someone say my time? No, no. My times are in thy hand. Now take the text like this. My, that's personal. My times. Good times, bad times. Times employed, times unemployed. Times rich, times poor. Times you're up, times you're down. Times you can pray, times you can't pray. Times you're all right financially, times you're not. Times when everything's well physically, times you're not. Times when everything's well spiritually, times they're not. Geographically, wherever you might be, my times and time change, but there's no change with him. Now, that's personal, my. It's plural. There's an S on it. There's an S on it. Whatever those times may be. Oh, my friend, this morning, listen. Do you believe this text is for you this morning? David's time is not in Absalom's hands, Ahithophel's hands, Shimei's hands. Our times this morning are not in Cameron's hands or Obama's hands or that wart of a boy in Iran. Not in his hands. You know, all boast of all the nuclear powers that they like. I tell you this, that this world's going to be destroyed. And God could use the atomic and the nuclear bombs and all them things that they have, and he probably will, to burn it up. But no man can touch one of us. No man can do anything. They can have all the bombs and they can be all the atheists that they like, but they can do nothing unless God allows it. I tell you, you broaden this out this morning. Our times of all of us here this morning and of all the church across the world this morning is in the hand of God. In the hand of God. You know, this is one of the greatest, I believe, Bible texts on the sovereignty of God, if we only could believe it. My, that's personal. Times, that's plural. In his hand, that's preserving. Get a lexicon or a concordance when you go home and trace in it the hand of God. Because I can tell you that his hands, and listen, those of you who are not saved in this meeting this morning, listen, you hear this, I can tell you that his hands are pardoning hands. Do you remember it says in Romans, he said, all day long I have stretched out my hands onto rebellious and gainsaying people, but you wouldn't come. He wants to pardon you this morning, dear. Would you not let him? And those hands are outstretched this morning. They're pardoning hands. Let me tell you, they're pierced hands. 800 years before he went to the cross, when crucifixion wasn't even thought about, it says away back in the heart of the book, they pierced my hands and my feet. And I tell you, he was wounded for our transgressions. Ah, yes, they're pierced hands this morning, and he holds them out to you, sinner. And he says, come, for all things are now ready. And he holds them out to you, backslider, this morning, come back. I love you, and I'll not hold anything against you. I'll wash it away as soon as you come. And I tell you, their hands that were pardoning hands, there were pierced hands. Aye, they're powerful hands, because it tells us that thy hands made all creation, the dry land and the earth, and his hand created me. And they're not only pardoning hands, I'll tell you this, powerful hands, they're strengthening hands. And they're leading hands. Do you want to be led by the Lord? Listen to what it says about David. He led him by the skillfulness of his hand. Now, when we try to lead ourselves, it's disastrous, and well we know it. Why don't you let him lead you this morning? Why don't you say, Lord, take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to thee. I've made a mess of it so far. Will you show me what way to go? Lord, I shouldn't have done that, and I shouldn't have went there, and I shouldn't. That's right, and you shouldn't. That's because you're trying to do it yourself. And as long as you want to do it yourself, he'll let you do it yourself. He led him by the skillfulness. I'll tell you, he's skillful in leading. And when God leads, he leads well. He leads well. But these hands, according to this text as I close this morning, they're delivering hands. Because that's what he says, my times are in thy hand. Deliver me from the hand of mine enemy. And he did deliver him, you know. He did. You read the story. No, he delivered him all right. Now let me ask you this as a close. If all our times, present, past, and future, if all our times are in the hand of the Almighty God of heaven, then why were you worrying last night? Why were you complaining yesterday? Why were you fretting this morning? Do you know why? Because we don't believe it. Why are you anxious over your health, over your job, over your children, over Christmas? Why? Well, if your times and everything to do with it is in the eternal hand of the eternal God, let me, when he closes his hand, can anybody touch you, can they? He says, you're graven upon the palms of my hand. And he closes it. There's times he closes it, and I'm glad he does. Oh, there's times he opens it. And he lets all hell blast you. But that's for your good. But then he'll close it. He'll close it. And no enemy or devil can open it. Oh, he'll keep you safe. Oh, I tell you this, we could go on with this text. My times. So why should we worry and why should we fear? And then he ends up in the last verse. Be of good courage and he shall strengthen your heart. He's ministering to us now. As to you this morning, be of good courage, he shall strengthen your heart. All ye that hope in the Lord. Oh, may God help us this morning to learn from the psalmist in the crisis, in the family crisis. And may we rise above them. And may we wait and be of good courage, for he shall strengthen our hearts.